Hello everyone. In this month's episode, I talk about caregiver leave. It is more than just a nice benefit. It's actually a workforce strategy. It helps you retain good people, reduce disruption, and build a more supportive workplace. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to the August edition of HR Hot Topics. I'm your host, Jodi Schafer, and my aim is to make this the most informative 10 minutes of your month. This month, I was originally going to talk about benefits sort of holistically and how challenging it can be to figure out what you can afford and how to link benefit offerings with what employees need in your workplace. But I'm actually doing a whole webinar on that with my good friend Eric Hanna at Brown & Brown, and Maynard Casterison is putting that on. So I'm going to see if I can get a link to it because it's happening next week, but this video isn't going to air for all of you until after the webinar. And so I'll see if I can get a link to it and include that in the email message in case you want to dive down that rabbit hole. So because of that, I thought, well, what is a pressing topic this month? And I wanted to share with you something that happened with me very recently and a couple members on our team as well, because it's affecting a significant portion of your workplace too. And that is the need for caregiver leave. So last month, unexpectedly, my mom fell and broke her hip. Now, my mom suffers from a chronic illness and so has balance issues, etc., and that has required us to unexpectedly, need to drop things to go and help support her and my dad, who is her primary caregiver. But last month, it happened again with a fall and then a subsequent surgery and a stay in a physical rehab long-term care place. And so these things happen unexpectedly, and I was able to rearrange my schedule on that day. I had a team that was cross-trained, could step in for me on the things that couldn't be moved. I moved the rest of it. My clients are so understanding. And I was able to juggle both work responsibilities and personal caregiving responsibilities for a period of about 5 weeks. It's kind of what it took to get mom back in the saddle again and dad set up, and then we were fine. And I had the help of my sister on that, who lives fairly close. We've had 2 other team members on the HRM team have to juggle work responsibilities and caregiving responsibilities for the last few years. One whose father was approaching end of life and then subsequently passed. Another whose mother is battling some health issues and she's good for a while and then she needs to go in the hospital. And so again, this idea of having to juggle. Hey everyone, it's Jodi. Just a quick time out here because every time I shoot these videos, I do a very poor job of reminding all of you how important it is to like our videos, comment if you have questions or you want to engage because we want to hear from you, and remind you about the interest list we're building for the Thriving Leadership Collaborative. And we put a QR code right here. So I promise I'll get better at working it into the messages. But until then, quick commercial. Sorry about that. But please do what you can to stay engaged. This is not unique to HRM. And in fact, you probably have experienced something similar, if not personally, within your business. And yet when we look at our policies, many employment policies are not really written for the realities of today. Some of you might have time off policies. I know all of you in Michigan have ESTA policies. So ESTA could be used for some of these caregiving responsibilities. But many of you also have additional paid time off. And that's probably what your employees are tapping into. They're using time that could have been used for vacations or their own health care, and they're having to instead pull from those banks to care for others. Many of you also have some sort of maternity leave policy. It could be just considered medical leave if you are the actual birth parent. Some of you have expanded beyond maternity leave and you now consider parental leave. It was kind of paternity leave, and then we've just sort of expanded it to parental leave, which allows for leave time not just for a birthing parent, but for adoption, for a non-birthing parent, etc. But we haven't really expanded that definition into full-on caregiver leave. We always sort of think about caring for young children and the need for that, and it's still the case, but birth rates in the US continue to decline rapidly. And yet our aging population continues to grow. In fact, in the coming decade, we will have more people over the age of 80 than we do entering kindergarten. Now let that just sink in for a minute. This idea of having to care for older individuals, whether they are your parent or a grandparent or an aunt, a sibling, someone who maybe isn't of an age where they might need long-term care, but they have a health condition, so you're caring for adults in addition to caring for children. I mean, all of this is sort of piling up on employees' plates, and they're trying to manage it within policies that are somewhat antiquated. And employers are feeling the impact of this. I know all of you have probably had at least one employee that had to call in unexpectedly because something happened with a parent. Or, they're trying to juggle care amongst their siblings. Also, family sizes are shrinking. People are having less and less children. So that is all going to kind of fall on the plate of less and less individuals too. So employers are feeling the pinch of this. And ultimately what happens when an employee feels like they can't juggle it anymore, they either max out all of their paid time off, they have no more ESTA, and yet the demand continues, or they have these repeated unexpected call-ins because they're juggling family emergencies. There's an impact on the employer side, and the employee ends up quitting, or you end up having to terminate them because they aren't reliable, they're not meeting your attendance standard. But there's a cost. There's a cost to doing nothing. And I think it would be sort of silly for all of us to bury our heads in the sand and think that this problem is going to go away. So I'd like to talk about caregiver leave today. I would like us to expand this idea of time off, having to care for young children, and kind of pull back and recognize that many of us are in what's considered the sandwich generation, meaning we may have children, even adult children, that still need us, and we have parents who are living longer and need us too, and we're being kind of stretched in both directions. So a couple of statistics for you. One is that roughly between 20 and 30%, depending on which study you look at, of your workforce currently has caregiving responsibilities. And again, that's only going to increase because the age of population is increasing. Of those, caregivers report unexpectedly missing an average of 1.2 days per month due to insufficient support elsewhere in the family dynamic. So it's already affecting their ability to juggle the work. And these are often your employees that are the most reliable, the ones that can juggle a lot at your workplace. They're detail-oriented, they're probably in leadership roles, and it's because of those attributes that the family sort of looks to them to help manage the caregiving responsibilities as well. So these are your highly valuable individuals. And so these are folks you don't want to lose. Turnover cost is real. You don't want to lose them. So how do you support them in a way that is fiscally responsible for you as well? Caregiver leave does not require that you create an entirely new bank of time off. You can, or you could look at your existing time off policies and simply expand definitions. So if you're already offering parental leave, for example, maybe you just change the policy to be called caregiver leave so that people could use it on either end of the aging spectrum. You're already accounting for the time, right? Same thing with PTO. If you're offering paid time off, do you put restrictions on that, or do you let people use it for any reason? ESTA for our Michigan employers has come into play, so that's a bank of time that some folks could utilize. But maybe there's an opportunity for you to create individual arrangements with key personnel when they have caregiving responsibilities, whether you pay for that time off or whether it's unpaid, but you grant the leave, you grant the flexibility. I think that's going to be really important. Now, the problem with some of this is you don't know when your employees are also juggling these caregiver responsibilities. In fact, there's a statistic that says 32% of caregivers have not disclosed their caregiving status to their employee because 1 in 5 say they've been treated poorly at work when they've done so in the past. So there is this fear of stigma We don't want to stall our careers or not be given opportunities that could relate, eventually to advancement because that we're juggling a lot at home. And yet the reality is it's coming out anyways because we're missing meetings, we can't focus, our patience is short. So it's not like people don't notice if they're really looking. But I do think employers, in relation to looking at policies and maybe expanding definitions and seeing if you can create some flexibility there, also working on the culture around caregiving, making it okay to talk about if you yourself are juggling this or have juggled it in the past, sharing some of that with your staff so they know that they're not alone. I think just trying to remove the stigma around it is really important. Manager readiness is another key component because often as the owner of the company, you might not know what's going on because you're not working as closely with that staff member as your manager is, but your manager sees some of this going on. So making sure that your managers are well trained on what your policies are, what supports exist, what they can and can't ask for is going to be important. Now, when I say caregiver leave, and I talked about the time component, perhaps paid time off, but there are other supports that you could put in place that would be really helpful for folks that are going through this. In addition to time off, whether it's paid or unpaid, the ability to have a somewhat flexible schedule for a period of time if necessary is a really huge benefit. And in fact, some employees will leave jobs that they love to take a job that has more flexibility because the flexibility is what's most important to them at that point in time. So if you can build in opportunities for flexibility, which requires cross-training of staff, right? It requires having maybe a pool of some supplemental resources when needed, subs or job sharing. You have, two part-time folks doing a job so they can kind of support each other. It does require potentially some creative staffing or training. That's another area. Another one is your EAP. If you have an employee assistance program that offers access to free counseling and resources, et cetera, caregiving takes a real strain. It's not just a strain in terms of like scheduling and juggling. There's an emotional strain. There's a physical strain. Often if you're physically helping folks, get into the house, get in and out of chairs, get to the bathroom, get to the shower, et cetera, it can be really exhausting. And so reminding your staff, if you have access to some of those counseling resources, making that connection specifically around caregiver. Another one that I think is not tapped into enough, but would be really helpful, is can you partner with another organization in your area that has expertise around care options for aging parents? So assisted living versus independent living versus, long-term care versus in-home, like what are the different things available? What are the cost models? How does insurance work around this? What about durable power of attorney and the healthcare, being the patient advocate on the healthcare side, making sure that your parents have listed you as somebody that can make decisions on their behalf in some of this. How do the finances work? There's just so much that comes with caregiving that is above and beyond getting a person to a doctor's appointment. And we don't know how to manage all of that. So can you partner with an outside entity that has expertise that would be willing to come in and do like free lunch and learns for your staff or anyone that's interested, right? So there's just a lot that can kind of go into your program that I think would really be helpful. And again, this isn't going away. Some things to get you started. I'm going to share with you kind of some simple steps to get you thinking. The one I talked about already, which is look at your existing policies, figure out what you're already offering, and decide if maybe some of your definitions could be expanded to increase access. FMLA is a good example of this. So if you have more than 50 employees within a 75-mile radius, there's a federal law that requires you to offer unpaid but job-protected leave for up to 12 weeks. But there are some definitions around who can access it and for what types of situations. One of the things you can access it for is helping to care for, immediate family members, but those definitions may not include grandparents. They may not include aunts and uncles. They may not include siblings, for example. So maybe you on your own, even though the law doesn't require you to expand definitions, maybe you on your own decide that you're going to expand definitions. So it would increase access. One I already talked about, parental leave, maybe you expand that to just be called caregiver leave so that people on both ends of the age spectrum could access that. Talking about this idea of flexibility. Can you build in flexibility around certain jobs? Does that require cross-training? Does it require, more than one person kind of knowing how to do the job? Can you have a sub-pool? Can you create kind of this resource listing that you can pull folks from when needed? That would be incredibly helpful. And then training managers on how to respond to these types of situations. They're all unique and nuanced. And so don't assume that you know what the employee might need, but create a culture or an environment where at least they're free to come and tell you and they can ask. And then together you can sort of figure out how you can best support them and navigate, because you don't want to lose them. Remember, the alternative is you do nothing and then you lose the person. And that has a cost too. I do think that if this is somewhat new to you, doing a bit of a pilot program, start small. Do a lot of conversation around this so your staff know what it is, how it can be used, why you're deciding to talk about it now, what resources you're putting in place, and then start to track the usage and figure out, if adjustments need to be made, if you need to do more, et cetera. Obviously, the demographics of your workforce will give you some indication of utilization, but until you actually roll this out, you won't know. So you want to track that. And then make sure that you're getting feedback from your team. So with that, I'm gonna leave you, and I'm just gonna remind all of you that caregiver leave is not just a nice to have. It is actually a retention tool. It's a job satisfaction tool. It's a culture builder, and it's a way that you can support employees, especially the ones that you depend on so much, to then be there for your customers, your clients, and your patients. So with that, I'll leave you. We'll pick this back up in September. If you have any questions, you can reach me directly, Jodi Schafer at workwithhrm.com.